let's see here. So can you guys see this okay?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Okay, great. So, well, thank you guys so much for inviting me. I was really excited to get this invitation, and it's also just exciting to see that, you know, it's such a small world to see faces I know already, and the kind of the world of XR, where, you know, I think video games in general, it's a smaller community than you realize, but especially when you think about XR, it's even smaller. So what I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to focus on XR and health and education. I kind of, you know, what is the reality? Like kind of what is the space that we're at right now with that, notwithstanding COVID, of course. Let's see. So just a little bit about me. I am a research scientist at the Yale School of Medicine, and I'm director of the Play for Real XR Lab. And then I'm also deputy director of the Play to Prevent Lab and the Yale Center for Health and Learning Games. And I'm also a K-12 scholar at the Yale Center for Implementation Science, and I'll talk about that in a bit, why that might, you know, why that hat kind of matters in what I'm doing. I've been developing games and evaluating games now for about 12, going on 12 years. In our XR lab, we're going into our 4th year, which is pretty cool. Here's our core team, just a bunch of names on there. You'll see on here a few names here from Oculus, because Oculus had an Oculus education. It was a program that I don't think that they're funding research groups now, but they funded us and got our lab started actually in 2017. And yeah, thank goodness for them. They've been a wonderful partner. So a lot of what we do in our lab, of course, like I said, we're an extension of our Play to Prevent lab in terms of developing video game interventions around health and health education. But our Play for Real XR lab, 3 of the projects that we're working on right now, we're working on a game called No Time Wasted. This is funded by Epic Games and Unreal Engine. It's an augmented reality game. The idea is that we're really wanting to teach kids about standardized drinking, you know, the standardized drinks, like this idea that, you know, when we read about something in a book, like what a standard, you know, size beer looks like, what 12 ounces is supposed to look like, what a standard size glass of wine or a shot of alcohol, like what all that's supposed to look like. And a textbook looks much different than in real life. So having kids actually practice in AR, filling glasses and knowing what like standardized drinks are. And then of course, a lot of those risk reduction behaviors around getting out of kind of sticky situations involving alcohol and making good choices around that. It's not, I don't want to say it's a, you know, don't, you know, say no to alcohol kind of game. It's more of a, you know, teens are most likely going to be in situations where they're alcohol and they are most likely going to drink. And how can we help them make good choices around drinking in terms of quantity and, you know, all the things that we need to know that help kind of reduce our risk around drinking. And that game right now is kind of on pause just because we're in the part of development where we bring in teens and help and have them create our videos. The game is actually created on the Magic Leap 1, which is not a good headset, just put that out there. I'm not a big fan of the headset, but you know, Magic Leap gave us a bunch of headsets, and so we're developing on it. But we don't have access to teens because of COVID. We're not allowed to interact with teens, so we can't have teens come in and do the actual videos for the game. So No Time Wasted is on pause right now, you know, probably mostly until the fall. The second game that we have is called One Night Stand, and we're working on that right now pretty heavily. This is around empowering Black teen girls around around making good choices around dating and communication around condom use and getting tested for HIV and STIs, so kind of knowing your status. This is not an XR game though. This is an online multiplayer, social kind of humorous fun game. We're working on that run right now. And again, kind of going through the hurdles of COVID and access to teens right now, but we will most likely do that game and do a randomized controlled trial with that, with teens online using Zoom, starting here in a few months. So I'm excited about that one. And then Invite Only VR. This is a vaping prevention game. This was funded by Oculus, and it's developed in VR. It was developed originally for the Gear VR and then in Oculus Go in mid-production. And then as soon as we released it, of course, now Oculus Go is defunct and no longer being supported as of December. So we need to consider next steps to moving that into the Quest. I mean, would be the obvious choice, but there's some hurdles there with Facebook logins that I'll talk about in a minute. I'm going to focus on talking about Invite Only VR today, just because this is a game that we've already developed and evaluated in a randomized controlled trial, and we have some good data to share on that. And we have a lot of really great experience to share too. So what I'm going to talk about today, and I have two computers going, so let me, just because I could never figure out how on Zoom to get my notes to show up. So obviously with you guys, I don't need to explain what XR is. This is an XR meetup and an XR group, but maybe I can give, some examples of XR in health and learning and kind of get you guys thinking about the way that, how we kind of use XR in our games and game interventions. And then I'm going to talk about Invite Only, our vaping prevention game, the development and evaluation of that. And then I'm going to talk more about like this idea of, are schools ready, or kind of where we are in the state of VR. And maybe it's bad timing to think about this in terms of COVID. But COVID's not this pandemic, and isolation isn't going to last forever, and schools will be back, and probably by the fall. And we want to think about, are they ready for us to be bringing in headsets and kind of be using headsets in classrooms? And then my optimism and caution and just next steps in general around XR and health and education. XR, again, you guys obviously know what XR is. I do like to use the term XR when I think about like the work we do, just because I think, extended reality, this idea that there's AR, VR, mixed or merged reality, but it kind of also leaves us open to think about what other types of extended realities there might be. We think of blended reality. I mean, that kind of goes on, and it kind of leaves us open to this idea that we're not just kind of stuck in AR, VR, MR. So I like the term extended reality for that, and changed our lab name actually to the Play for Real XR. It was an AR, VR lab, and now we're an XR lab, just because I just like the term, I guess. Some examples of XR in, sorry, my other computer here. When we think about XR in health and education, this is obviously this idea of going beyond entertainment. And this can include the form of simulations, 360 videos, multiplayer spaces like our chat. This can be educational games, can be training apps, it can be learning experiences. There's a lot of examples to think about. Probably one of the most obvious ones, and it has been around probably the most, is this idea of occupational learning, medical training. I always like to kind of give a shout out to nurses and nursing schools, because actually nursing has done quite a lot in this field. They do a lot of medical training, learning basic skills, how to dress wounds, how to interact with difficult patients. But when we think about occupational learning too, like we think about, like, not this last year, even gosh, 2 years now ago, Walmart was training their employees for Black Friday. They found it cheaper to train temporary employees in VR than having them come in on company time and train them. And this way too, they also get some kind of this simulated idea of what to expect in terms of Black Friday. And then flight training, when we think about VR is wonderful, this idea that we can practice these kind of skills that need to be learned and before emergency situations arise. We don't want our pilot to have to be learning how to land on water. We don't want to have them to be practicing that for the first time when in an emergency situation when we're in flight. So this idea that we can practice skills over and over in a safe space has always been kind of, I think, really important to think about in terms of XR and education. And then this is much more perhaps where I am in terms of XR, is this idea of experiential learning. This idea that we're learning through experience, right? Our hands-on, like, again, experiments with dangerous or expensive chemicals, produce chemical reactions. We can explore cells, diagnose and cure diseases. We can explore places all over the world, explore, like the Egyptian pyramids. We can travel to the space station. We can explore different planets, experience the concept of weightlessness. I can go on and on. When we think about art, sculpt, paint, create, share our work. We can 3D print our work now that we're creating in VR. We can practice skills in sports. We can play multiplayer in sports, fitness. Think of Beat Saber, right? We can actually get a good workout now using VR. We can use multiplayer opportunities for collaboration, problems, health prevention and promotion. We can practice skills related to making healthy health decisions. And what I mean when I say practice this, we know that behavior change is hard. It is really hard to change behaviors. Otherwise, we would all be exercising 30 minutes a day. We would be eating our fruits and vegetables and flossing and making healthy choices around, drinking and smoking. It would just be super easy to do. But behavior changes actually isn't easy. It's quite hard. And the best way to change behaviors, right, is to practice them. So we have to spend a lot of time kind of practicing before we really feel confident that we are going to stick to a behavior. So this idea that we can practice skills before going out into the world and kind of exercising these behaviors. And I think VR is really great for that. But it's this kind of this idea that I've been thinking a lot about over the last few years, especially in the work I'm doing. And this is, can XR fundamentally transform learning? Can we bring a headset in and kids are going to learn better and retain education better, or be more profoundly kind of influenced by what they're being taught if we're using a medium like XR? And the answer is maybe. We don't know yet, right? Research moves slow and technology moves fast, and it's going to be a long time perhaps before we have enough kind of really solid research to kind of know that. But I always like to, be positive about that. I also like to think about kind of where we've come from too, and kind of where we are. And one example I like to use or share is when we were doing our randomized controlled trial and going into schools with our game, we would often go in and bring kids to the media library and about 20, 30 at a time. And they would play our game and then head back to class after about an hour.
Is anybody else frozen?
Hey, Chris, I'm still here. I cannot hear or see Kimberly either. I think she froze out.
On the same boat. She's frozen.
Oh, yeah.
There's Carlo from Australia. The same thing happening here with me, my connection too as well, guys. I just came in. Sorry to be late.
Yeah.
So this kind of reminds me what happens to me on Sundays. For those of you who are familiar with the Open Coffee Club, every now and then my Zoom just freezes, and I figured out that it has to do with Skype being active in the background. And I don't know if it's incoming Skype messages or what it is, but those two programs not only sometimes they conflict, and then I just have to reboot. And I think that
Hi, sorry about that. My
back?
computer crashed. I'm letting it start.
Welcome back.
Welcome.
Just give me 2 seconds here. It was the worst timing too with my reference to the Chromebook crashing. Yeah, 2 seconds. Boy, it just crashed hard. Worst timing ever. 2 seconds.
Maybe this law always applies at the worst time.
Always, right? Yeah, I don't know the last time my computer crashed. I don't know why.
actually, Kim, it happened to me as well. I just mentioned it while you were still frozen. In my situation, it was a conflict between Skype and Zoom. And for me to resolve it was to completely quit Skype, not log off, but completely quit it.
Well, hold on.
Kim, what you need to do,
and I can barely hear you guys here on my phone too.
If you can read it on my chair, this is a gaming chair. It says respawn.
Okay, I'm going to respawn right now. Okay, let me try this here. It's not big for a good recording, I bet. Okay, let me get off of here and I will try this again.
And we lost you again.
Okay, I'm back.
You're back.
I'm really sorry. And the funny thing too is when I just, connected on my phone was connected to my Beats headphones, which are up in my daughter's room. And she just had a freak out moment. She was like, somebody's listening to me from the corner of my room. She goes, I heard a man's voice, but it was my Beats headphones. She's like, come up here immediately. And I'm like, I can't.
Keep her excited. Did you say that the Oculus Go is no longer being supported by Oculus?
Yes, unfortunately it is. As of, you can still use whatever they have on their, in their library, but they're not going to allow you to develop for it or update, or they're not going to provide support for it. So there's not going to be any more updates or anything. Yeah, it's a huge bummer.
Yeah, I saw articles on that, but I couldn't tell if it was really dead or just dead for new development, which I guess dead for new development means dead anyway.
Yeah, and the idea that it's just not going to be, it's like kind of having an old iPhone, the idea that there won't be anything new, won't be able to have any updates or anything. And you can't buy it anymore. They're not selling it anymore. So anyway, what I was talking about with this, the Chromebook was, the girl just threw it on the floor and she was really careless with it. And the media center, the person that was working at the media center, she was like, yeah, we get this all the time. Kids are really hard on their Chromebooks, they really kind of roll their eyes when you ask them to get them out in class. They get annoyed by it. The excitement of having your own one-to-one computer and Chromebook is gone, right? Kids don't see the excitement in that. It's old, it's just old news. So I just wonder if a lot of, we just have to be careful if this idea of VR, XR, AR, if it is able to do more because we've kind of got a captive audience. And I'll talk more about that in a minute when I talk about our study. But, it just begs to, we just beg to wonder if we're going to be in this place, 5-10 years from now with VR, AR, maybe not. But we're definitely there with Chromebooks in a lot of ways. So what I wanted to talk about was today was our game Invite Only VR. It's a vaping prevention game. We developed this, Preview Labs, a prototyping company, developed this game with us. We won quite a few awards for it, and in Forbes we were listed as one of the top 50 games of VR for 2019. So we got a lot of excitement about the game. It's a cool game. If you still have access to an Oculus Go and have the opportunity to download it from the Oculus Store, it's free. Please do it. Please check it out. I'm really proud of what we did. The game, again, it's a vaping prevention game. Obviously, you guys are probably very, very aware of the issues and concerns with vaping right now. But just to quickly go over that, there's been an alarming increase in high schools that have reported using e-cigarettes, and this is now extending into middle school students. We have about almost 28% of high schoolers having reported using e-cigarettes in the last 30 days, and now we're having almost 11% of middle school students that have been reported that. And the concern with e-cigarettes specifically is that the nicotine levels are quite high, and they tend you get a hit much harder than you do on a cigarette, and it's delivered much faster. And these tiny little pods, this is about the equivalent of a pack of cigarettes. So kids are going through these pods really quickly, and they're not realizing that the nicotine levels in these are as high as a pack of cigarettes. So you're having kids that are getting addicted to nicotine quite quickly in a very short amount of time. And that's a problem because when you introduce nicotine into a 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old's brain, it can actually have lifelong effects. It's going to make kids, it's kind of this idea, right? If we start, almost I think 95% of cigarette smokers that are, smoke as an adults, they all started as a teenager, younger than the age of 17, 18. So we want to try to get kids, not having any nicotine in their system until their brains are developed enough to not really kind of change the chemical makeup of their brain. It also puts them at a higher risk to be addicted to other drugs in life, and alcohol use. They may have problems with gambling. There's a lot of really interesting studies around early nicotine addiction and other risk behaviors. And we also know with e-cigarettes specifically that they're known to cause breathing difficulties, inflammatory reactions, lung diseases. Kids that vape are actually at a higher risk to have more like COVID complications even. So we really don't want kids having anything to do with vaping. And so the idea was, we wanted to make a game to try to get kids to never start, or if they had started to reconsider and stop using e-cigarettes. So our game it was developed with the input of over 100 teens. And like I mentioned, we developed it for the Gear VR early on because that's what was out there. And then mid-development, the Oculus Go came out and we switched to the Oculus Go. It's a narrative-based game. So we did not want this game, again, to be this preachy, game about the dangers of vaping, and this idea to say no, because we know that that never really works with teens. So it's a humorous, lighthearted kind of game around the character, your Mike, and you're trying to get an invite to this party by the end of the school day. And you're trying to, it's actually Sean who's on the right side here. He's kind of the cool kid. He's a senior, you're a freshman. He doesn't know you really exist outside of health class. And so you're going to have to put yourself in some kind of risky situations in which, because Sean vapes. And so you're going to follow him to the bathroom. You're going to be putting yourself in situations where kids are vaping, and you got to kind of find ways to get out of those situations without vaping or giving in to peer pressure, but still remaining cool and feeling like you're in control. So the game uses voice recognition software. So this idea that, when we practice saying no, especially for a teen, that we're not just clicking through responses, that we're actually using our voices to say no, and the characters are reacting to what we say. And when I say voice recognition, I'm saying that, the kids had 3 responses to choose from, and they would choose one and speak it. It wasn't just anything and all responses. They had to choose from one of the kind of predetermined choices. But I really like this idea of using your own voice to practice. And then again, there's this place to practice those refusal skills and taking knowledge that you learn in the game and using that knowledge to correct your peers or other people like this guy. And this is Matthew. He's the vape pod dealer in your school, and so you're kind of setting him straight with the new knowledge you gain throughout the game. And then we had some fun other parts of the game. We had a space cats, in which you're every once in a while, it was kind of a game within a game. Everybody's playing space cats in your school, and every time to kind of push kids to do well in the game, we would give them bonus time in this game called Space Cats, in which you're just you're in a space cat, a spaceship, and you're shooting at robots, cats coming at you, and the kids loved the game. So it encouraged them, gave them a break from the education piece of the game, but also allowed them to really kind of focus and do well, because they would earn more time in the kind of the mini game that was not education related. So our research project, we really focused on, we really wanted to check on the impact of the game. We wanted to see if we could increase a lot of things related to behavior change, like knowledge, our intentions of using e-cigarettes, our harm perceptions, social perceptions, our ability to refuse, and our behaviors related to e-cigarettes. And then we also wanted to get kind of their acceptability of the game. Did kids like it? Did they like playing it? Was there, did they give them headaches? Did they feel, nauseated and not want to play anymore? Or were they bored? Kind of all of those questions. And then we really, we explored the kind of their VR experience and their immersion and this kind of, sense of presence and their perceived responsibility for decisions made in the game. The kind of this idea that, that we wanted them to feel like the decisions they were making in the game were theirs, and it wasn't just, they were not just kind of a passive recipient to information coming in. So here's some of the artwork from the game. So one of the things that we did, I think that was really cool, and what we tend to do with all our games, is we work really closely with schools and teachers and principals and school counselors, and then of course the students or the teens that our game is made for. So this is, you can see to the left is to the right, I'm sorry, we worked with the school to kind of get a really good idea of what we wanted the classroom to work on. And then the left here is the actual artwork that Preview Labs did for us. And this is the classroom, and this is the hallway, because a lot of things happen in the hallway before class. Everybody's vaping in bathrooms, so we had to have a bathroom, which was a little bit difficult because there's not a lot of space in the bathroom in terms of kind of, having the VR and having a lot of space, but it worked well. And another thing I think that I'm really proud of that we did too was, we really wanted this game to feel authentic. So we worked with a friend of mine who is a musician and does a lot of work with audio in video games. And we went in and we actually collected a lot of the audio from the school. So what it sounds like in the hallway when between classes, the sounds of a classroom, chairs scooting, kids coughing, phones going off, cars driving by, all the sounds of a school. And we made sure to kind of capture all of that to make sure our environments really felt true and authentic. And then what we did too is we worked with kids in the community that we were testing the game in. We just had kids come in and do the voice acting for us. And these were kids that we knew, and we kind of put out a call and kind of asked around if there were kids interested in being voice actors for our game. And they also vetted the scripts. So all the narrative, all the writing, all the audio, everything was done by the teens with us. So it's a game for teens by teens. And I think that's always the best approach in these kind of developments when you're thinking of games for teens. We worked with a school. We actually, Milford School District, it's a school district here in Connecticut. They actually working in the partnership of working with schools actually took quite a while. I was going to say it took us a good 8 months, but this was happening during our development, so it didn't really kind of hurt us in the sense that we didn't have a game ready and we're waiting. We were actually kind of talking to them along the way while we were working in the development. But we had to meet with teachers and get their, the health teachers and get their approval, school administration. We had to take it to a school board. We had meetings for for parents if they wanted to come. No parent ever came, but we offered those meetings. We would sit outside of parent-teacher conferences at tables so parents could talk to us if they, just to let them know what we were doing with their kids in the schools. We also created a plan that was kind of beneficial to both the schools and us. The teachers and the school didn't really want us to give gift cards to students. And that's normally what we do when we do a randomized controlled trial. We give participants gift cards for participating. And they didn't want us to give kids gift cards. So what we did was we arranged to donate Oculus Go's instead. So each school, we had 3 schools we worked with, and they each ended up with 30 headsets. And then what we did from there too is we didn't want to just feel like we were dropping off headsets and leaving, thank you for your data, goodbye. We also spent a lot of time doing professional development with the schools, providing workshops for teachers to teach them how to use the headsets, to feel comfortable with technology. If they wanted to use them in their classroom, we would help them get that set up. We loaded the headsets full with as many games, education games as we could, and created kind of a teacher's manual for them to give them ideas for what they could use in their class. So we wanted to be a support, like a continuing kind of support for them beyond the trial. And we also wanted to ensure that our game was there too, so they could continue to use it in years to come. Of course, this was all before COVID, but we're excited to of course, step back in and work with them again in the fall and kind of continue that relationship we started with them. And this is a picture of us going in. This is what a typical play session would look like. The game was about 2 hours long. Kids would come in, they would play about 45 minutes to an hour with some breaks in between. They could quit at any time if they were tired of playing and come back later. But generally the game took about 2 hours to complete. So we would bring them down to the media center and they would play, and it was a lot of fun. So our study design, we ended up enrolling 278 students, about pretty equal between 7th and 8th grade. And we had an intervention and a control. Our intervention played a game. And then our control was just business as usual, right? So these were just kids that kind of normally, this is whatever the school would be doing anyway, which they had a kind of an expert in vaping came in and gave a seminar right before we started the trial, and everybody got exposed to that. And then half of the students again got exposed to our game. And then what we did was we followed them. We did a survey before they played. We did it immediately after they played. And then we did another survey at 3 months, and then another survey again at 6 months later. So our idea was to follow them for 6 months to see if not only playing a game kind of would affect some of these behaviors, mediators to behavior change, but if it would sustain it over time. And again, COVID happened at our 6 month kind of follow up and students were kind of just dropping off the map even in schools. So we had a hard time following up with all students, but I still feel like we did a pretty good job. We got about 85% of students in our follow up. I'm bummed we didn't get everybody, but I think we worked really hard with the schools and did the best we could. Here's just a breakdown of our population. You can see here, Milford District is a primarily white demographic, but we also know in terms of the literature and research around vaping, unfortunately, this is kind of the population, the demographic that is using and vaping the most. So, you know, I would have liked to have more of a, kind of a diverse population, but this was just the school we partnered with, and this was this is their population. So behaviors, we had very few kids reported ever having used vaping at all, and no participants had reported ever tried smoking or vaping marijuana, actually out of the 278. So we didn't have any behavior changes to report. Which is fine. You know, we looked at this as a pilot randomized controlled trial. We really didn't expect to see behaviors change. And we knew we weren't powered high enough with our N to really see that. And that was okay. But like I said, out of the 149 kids that we had played, the mean play time was about 1 hour and 48 minutes. But if you notice here, almost all kids finished the game. Very few kids didn't finish the game all the way. We only had a few kids that actually didn't, ended up dropping out of the study completely. And I'll just make sure, just want to note that we did this during physical education class, which the schools had chose that because everybody had to take physical education. So it was a way to, have all kids have a chance to be in the study. But what we found really quick is that you really don't mess with kids' physical education class. They love PE. They love to play basketball and be outside. And they were kind of annoyed that we were, come in, even if we had, VR headsets, which are pretty cool. The kids were like, yeah, I don't want to lose my gym time. So we were competing with PE class, which in the future, we know better not to ever do that again. But we were still so excited to see how many kids actually finished the study and finished the game. It's very rare to see that in any study, to see kids actually finishing the full study, kind of unprovoked. So we were really, really, really excited to see that kids liked the game and were playing it. We looked at, again, we assessed our changes in those dependent variables that I mentioned earlier: knowledge, perceived likelihood of e-cigarette use, harm perceptions, refusal, self-efficacy, social perceptions across 6 months. We did mixed within subject ANOVAs, and then we looked at these effect sizes, right? So 0.01 is considered small, 0.06 is moderate, and 0.14 is considered a large effect. So that's what we did for our analysis. So we're really excited to see the change in knowledge. We had a large effect in terms of our change in knowledge, meaning that the kids that played the game compared to kids that didn't had a greater knowledge and sustained that change in knowledge well into 6 months. And an example of that was vaping. We had a 15 items of knowledge questions that we asked, and an example is, can vaping cause lung damage? So we were really, really excited to see that. Change in harm perceptions. This was a moderate effect, but we still did see kind of, that effect, a change and a difference in between experimental and control, and that was maintained over 6 months. And the same with social perceptions. This idea that that it's cool to vape, right? There was a small effect there, but again, we did see a difference between experimental and control. And some sub-analysis that we did, which was, I just kind of threw these in here right before this meeting because I hadn't, we just kind of been doing some more additional analyses. And we've realized that addiction knowledge, that kids understand and realize now that, vaping can be addictive, right? So compared to the kids that play the game and those that didn't, the kids that played the game had a greater knowledge and understanding that vaping is addicting, and they sustained that over 6 months. And the same idea with addiction perceptions. So we saw, and these were both large effects. So that's really kind of cool to see that the game not only just helps kids understand e-cigarettes and vaping, but addiction as well, because like I said, that was really kind of key and important that we want kids to understand. We didn't see a change in their perceived likelihood of using e-cigarettes. This idea, do you think you're going to vape or use an e-cigarette in the next year? This remained low. However, the kids had already kind of started with really healthy attitudes and intentions from the beginning. So our mean was already so low. We had a ceiling effect. There was not much room for that to move. And the same with self-efficacy. Our mean was high, and we want it to be high in terms of kids believed that they could refuse if their peers asked them to vape. That remained high across all 4 study periods, and we didn't see a change there. But again, there was a ceiling effect there. So this is really indicative of a very successful primary prevention. And then our participant experience, kids, we had really high scores in terms of their gameplay satisfaction. I enjoyed playing the game. Their virtual reality experience, I had this sense of being in a virtual world, similar to the sense of being in a real place. And then this idea of responsibility, and I felt responsible for the decisions I made in the game. So we saw some really great scores in terms of the kids' experience with the game. And that's what we want to see. We want to see a game that, the kids are learning, but they're also enjoying what they're playing, right? And that they would play it again, right? And they would take what they learned in the game out and use it outside of the game. They enjoyed playing. They felt present. They felt, immersed in the game. And I was also excited to see that, that our audio, the sounds I heard in the game made it feel like I was visiting a real place. And that was also a higher score too. And we were excited to see that we kind of hit the mark on the audio, which was great. So we had some really great data come out of that study. So are schools ready for XR is the big question though, right? We did this study and we had some great outcomes and we were able to change a lot of those mediators to behavior. That's all great and good. But that at the same time, there's still a long way we have to go, right? Like we're still kind of coming back to this same question here, right? Like, and one of the big things that I'm interested in, and I should talk about it. I guess I can go ahead and talk about it here. In terms of our optimism, we had a really, really great experience and we had really great preliminary results. Everybody, the teachers and the students were super excited about us being there. They were excited about the XR and using the headsets. There are a lot of XR games and apps for education and health that currently exist, and we have a ton of room for creating more. The technology is becoming more and more user-friendly and intuitive. We think about the Quest and the Quest 2, that just keeps getting better. And they're becoming cheaper too. And they're actually, it makes sense that, the Quest 2 was $300 headset, and it's a great headset, and that's amazing. And why don't we put those into schools? And what we found is, and I truly believe that, XR can provide these kind of unique opportunities for greater immersion and skill practice. And that's the optimism to this. However, from what I've learned with talking with teachers and having done this, for quite some time, teachers are always nervous to implement kind of these, any sort of technology intervention in schools and in classes, especially when it comes to VR and XR. Unless you have those champions in your schools that really aren't nervous to just kind of jump in. So we had, like I said, we had a lot of teaching to do just in terms of the school administration and teachers. However, the good news here is that kids get it, and they will throw those headsets on and they'll figure it out, and it will take them all of 5 minutes to figure it out. It's really the teachers that are more nervous about the headsets and using them, but they are nervous to implement them in schools still. Technology moves real fast, and like I mentioned, and research tends to move much slower than that, and we are a prime example of that. Here we are, we created this amazing game that is, showing some amazing, some really good results, and it's on a Oculus Go that is now not being created. You can't buy them anymore, and it's not being supported. So in terms of us, we just got shut down really fast. And it's not like we have, we're a nonprofit lab, we run on grants. It's not like we have funding set aside to move this into another headset or device for a next generation of headsets and for schools. So we're kind of in a place where we're stuck. And again, not everybody has access to headsets, and when we think about access to all, right? This is a big thing. We want to ensure access to all. We don't want to ensure just access to schools that can afford expensive headsets. So that's kind of an important thing that I really think about a lot, and I think it's important to always think of, consider when we're creating these experiences is how can we ensure like everybody has access to them? And then also thinking about your intervention or whatever you're creating, how can you ensure access to all in terms of English language learners, when you think about kids with disabilities, when you think about kids with a hearing or vision impaired, what can we do to ensure that all kids are getting access to that? And there's a lot of ways that we can think about that without having to necessarily adapt our games. We can think about, streaming the game onto screens, and we can think about kids playing with other stronger, maybe readers. We can, there's a lot of things we can think about, but we really want to be conscious of that. And then finally, research is still really greatly needed in this field, and especially in terms of implementation science. And that's why I was saying before that I do wear that hat, that implementation science hat, and I wear it proudly in the sense of I still think we need to hear a lot from schools and teachers and learn more about those barriers and facilitators to getting XR into schools and into after school programs and getting them to students. So for next steps for us, just to wrap this up here, we're in terms of labs and we're always, in search of additional funding to kind of keep our projects alive and well. I always say that, I got my PhD to do research. I didn't get a PhD, and I don't understand business and marketing and all those things that we just really weren't taught in school, and nobody really, we didn't think about them, right? That our research would move from something, out in the field or in the field to actually being something that can be, marketed and used and in schools. And so, You know, our lab, again, is just, we're nonprofit grants, so we're always looking for grants to kind of keep our work moving. And it's nice to kind of find partners where we can maybe hand over some of this work and let them figure out how to get it to the kids that can benefit, you know, the most. But we are looking to move our game into other platforms for greater reach and accessibility. You know, Facebook, with their current situation where with the login restrictions, this has become a huge barrier for us. We really wanted to move our game into the Quest. The Quest and Quest 2, port it there, but now I'm really considering if it's worth it, just because schools are not going to be able to use those headsets as is right now, considering that you have to have a Facebook account to log into a headset. So it's a moot point. Teachers and school administrations are never going to let kids, they have to use headsets where they have to log into a Facebook account. And we're talking about middle school students too that aren't even 13, 14 yet. They're not going to have accounts. And schools are just not going to be able to afford the hefty business enterprise account, you know, to bypass that. It's a lot of money. It's I think it's like $150 per headset to maintain that per year, where you would not have to use that login. So it's just we've hit a roadblock here. And then finally, moving forward, we want to do a larger study to evaluate the effectiveness of the intervention. So this is looking at our game, like with, you know, 1,500 students, to see if we actually can follow them for a year and a half, and see if we can change behaviors, and not just those early indicators of behaviors. And then again, really trying to understand those barriers and facilitators associated with implementation. I think that will help move the field along in general in terms of education. So yeah, so that's our game. Again, it's so free and available on Oculus Go store, if anybody's interested, or always on our playforourlab.org. We have a nice trailer and video there too, or follow us on Twitter. And this is us and our funding. Yeah, so I will end it here. I feel like I talk so much that my throat's a little scratchy, but let me see. How do I stop sharing?
Okay. Let me see.
Oh, right
okay,
here.
good.
Haha, there. Now we can see each other. Okay.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So yeah, so I don't know if anybody had questions or discussions or.
Sure, I have a comment or two.
Wonderful.
First, insofar as I have an MBA as well, and I've productized over $500 million worth of VR, XR content in all around the world, mostly for military and some of the intelligence services, but also for education. It's very hard to do for school. I just want to, boy, are you brave. Boy, are you brave. I had an investor come to me and go, gee, I want to invest a few $1 million into VR games, educational games for K-12. And I said, save your money.
Mm-hmm.
The cell cycle is over 4 years. And I've got a book I'm going to finish where I did some research. You said the teachers are sort of shy about VR and computer games and game-based learning, GBL. I put it a little more bluntly, they are scared shitless of it, and they're very resistant to it. There is research out of the UK where they went to the teachers and they said, no, we're absolutely scared. The students know more about computers and computer games than we do. We don't want to get into it. It was very, very negative. The irony is I have a doctorate in educational technology. I've taught people teachers how to use a VR and XR in about 2 weeks.
Mhm.
You don't need to know how to print a book in order to use a book in class. But the conventional knowledge right now is you need to know everything about computers and computer games and social media and so on, and they are scared. I have a briefing on this gap, the T3 gap, the train the teachers gap that I gave to the Assistant Secretary of the Department of Education. And he agreed, yeah, but there right now is no funding mechanism to teach the teachers how to do GBL.
Mhm.
The head of the Federation of American Scientists did a great briefing at one time that I saw on creating a DARPA of education. I've worked for DARPA for many years on military weapons and training and whatnot, but what we really need for brave people like you is a DARPA of education. We keep talking about how important it is, and the potential is awesome. I've had many friends, many professors compare training, especially STEM, like subatomic particles, doing it with VR or XR versus book learning, and the it seems that 20th century students, the millennials, are getting even worse with book learning, whereas experiential, they love, they're nuts about it. That's what they're really into. And it was fascinating, and say the one on subatomic particles, not only did the VR guys learn faster, but they did a year follow-up. They did a post a year later, and it was a 28-year-old. The book learners remembered less than 20%. The experiential, the XR learners, over 80, because they had emotion. They were just talking about muons and gluons. Those were beach balls and bright shining things and sounds and emotions. As you know, every memory in your brain has an emotion attached to it, and VR really, really digs into that. So we really need T3, and that's a separate train the teachers, and that's a separate conversation. I'd love to have with y'all sometime in the future, because I've been looking at it. The money is in this appears to be with the parents, of where you sell them. There's some kind of monetization, either free, uh, either having in-app sales or having some kind of monetization of the game. This is valuable to parents, and they can buy it. You can get into mass marketing with them. Very hard to do with schools. There's no central point for selling to schools. You have to pitch each one. It's a pity that Oculus is now having the problem with their headsets, because that would have been a great partner. Partnering with hardware is a great one. So it's needed. It's I'm thumbs up for the work you did. I have a question for. I was looking at like a drug and alcohol addiction, and a couple of schools, University of Houston and Pennsylvania, have done what I used to do with the military, that is virtual travel. So they found that addicts, whether it's smoking or whatnot, have very limited ability to look into the future. Just like soldiers have a when they're supposed to get into a tank or a weapon system, they have a hard time seeing what happens depending on the decisions you make. So in this, they did virtual travel. A huge part of addiction, I'm so sorry to be preaching to the choir, is peer pressure, and they're not even aware of it. So somebody somebody goes into a scenario and either goes into a bar or like a party. It's a birthday party, and they walk in the door, and somebody offers them a drink. And they go, well, I'm trying to stay away from alcohol. It's his birthday. Just one, just this one. And they go, okay, just this one. Then they walk down the hall, and here's people doing a couple of lines of Coke in one of the bathrooms. And they go, hey, try it. It's just this one, just this one. So they do that, and they keep going. And at the end of just like with my military scenarios, at the end, they're lying passed out in the gutter. And so they see the end result. And as you play that scenario over and over again, just this one becomes a red flag. They can finally see what this leads to. And they got some great learning experience out of that, because they're able to see down the road, if you do vaping, if you do Coke, if you do a bunch of things, here's how you're going to wind up. And of course, you dramatize it a little bit and so on. So the question is, just out of curiosity, have you looked at a VR, XR experience showing consequences?
Oh yeah, and the game actually shows a ton of that. So in the game, you do a lot of, there is time travel in the game. And it's oddly enough, the girl that throughout the game, you keep getting texts from a random person and you don't know who it is. And it turns out it's the girl you like. Her name's Priya. But she is sending you texts from the future to try to help you make better choices and to help her, because she becomes as addicted to vaping and doesn't realize that she has a vaping, an addiction. So throughout the game, there's a lot of that, that future orientation. Really, for kids too, what we've learned is that they don't really care so much about the future, but if you can kind of get at them at the now of, like, it'll affect your, how you play on your sports. It'll affect your breath and your clothes and it costs a lot of money. So if you can get at them at this kind of immediate things, sometimes it's really hard for kids because they're like, well, I'll just quit anyway, in 6 months or 3 months, or I'll quit when I'm, next year, they just can't think so far ahead. So a lot of times you just kind of have to be kind of creative in how you kind of try and get to them in the now, because that's why a lot of those negative messaging doesn't work with teens, because they just are like, meh, that's not going to be me. It
won't happen to me. It sounds like Priya was like an IA, an intelligent assistant, where she might go and she winds up lying in the gutter, whereas the avatar, the player, him or herself, doesn't it can't see that happening to them. IAs it can be really useful for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. I just have a question.
I had a very quick question, and really it tags on to what Chris already kind of sort of touched upon. And forgive me if the question is direct, Kimberly, but I'm coming from a business background. So I'm asking myself, why would your lab, why would your team continue struggling in the nonprofit sector where there's really no money? Why not go, and implement a proper revenue model in what you've built, or something along those lines? Go into the private sector where there are funds available for new technologies like this.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. It's one of those things, like I'm a researcher. So I think about the value of research, in terms of trying to make a change in the lives of youth. I didn't, you know, especially when we first got money from Oculus to do this project, and they were like, you know, they gave us
Sure.
the Gear VR, and I remember like the clunkiness of it and the headset overheating, and in my head I'm just like, no teacher's going to ever use this. Like I was like, we are going to create this because Oculus asked us to and gave us money to do it, and we're going to do our study, and we're going to you know, publish these results. But I was like, and I didn't see the real value of it. But then as soon as we got Oculus Go, I was like, oh my gosh, this could actually truly be a real thing, right? Like the Oculus Go, it was easy to use, it was cheap. It didn't have the issues that the Gear VR did. It was really kind of easy to figure out. So then it just became different. You know, I don't know. I guess it is just trying to see if we find a partner. I think we're kind of in this unique space. It's not so much the XR, but the need for vaping prevention interventions that schools are really just dying for right now, because there's nothing out there. And vaping is such a huge problem with schools. And I think that's been the heartbreak for me, is we have teachers and schools reach out all the time, constantly, about our intervention. And they're like, oh, it's in VR. You have to get a VR headset that doesn't exist now. And that's really hard to say to them because they want it. They want it and they want to know how to get it. And I can't give it to them. So, and then again, you know, and Oculus has kind of moved away from education experiences. So, you know, they're not going to continue to fund us to now move it into a new system that can't even be used in schools. So, so I'm doing it for research sake, I guess. We put the game out there for free for anybody that can access it. And, you know, we've had probably 5,000 downloads. That's good.
Yes, I'm just trying a way to continue this. It sounds to me like you're at some sort of dead end there with no further funding coming, the current technology being superseded by something new. And so if you've already done a lot of good, but how do we scale that up? And clearly funding is required. So how are you going to get that? And Chris knows more about this than I do, but it seems like, you know, schools, there's just no money there.
Right. Well, and what we've found is actually, I mean, like I said, with schools, they're really they're really hurting for vaping prevention interventions that don't need like a specialized, you know, physician or public health educator to come in and train people to be able to give that intervention. So, you know, yeah, and most likely, I mean, we do have a smoking, a tobacco use 2D game on our, you know, in our other lab. It's a free game though, so it's not, you know, you're not making any money off of that, but teachers are using it. We've had, you know, 150,000 like downloads. So I think there is like a market out there, you know, but the VR is just going to be harder. So we just do it for research sake, and I think that's important too, is just to continue to do the research to show that we can do these things and keep asking the questions. I also think school programs are a good place to be too, because they don't have the restrictions of schools.
Okay, well, thank you. Very interesting presentation. I learned a lot. Thanks for.
Thank you. I saw a question. Juliana, I think, asked if does your game play like an RPG, where they can be the hero or the supporter? Unfortunately, they can't. You play as one person right now, and that was with our limited budget. You play as Mike, and you just, you know, Mike is he's just the main character. We're wanting to make an extension, a new kind of a marijuana vaping game, and what we're wanting to do is that you could take on a different perspective of a different character. But that would be nice if we could switch. But again, funding, you know, games are expensive. We didn't have a lot of funding to start with, so we had to really work with what we had.
Can you ramp up to OxyContin from vaping? You know how many teens are getting killed, who are dying from that. That's a
right.
real nitty-gritty problem.
we're working on a in our other lab. I'm also our Play to Prevent that we're working on we've got a grant to make a game around opiate prevention. So focusing on that. Yeah. And that one's been under development for about a year.
Let's talk sometime in the future. I looked into how teens are different from adults in what they need to get clean from opiates, and that one interesting market might be the rehabs. There are rehabs that specialize in teens, that is in young folks, and the rehab business is right around $45 billion a year just in the US. And the effectiveness, guess what the effectiveness is right now with the present means of trying to get people off of opiates and alcohol. Want to take a guess? That is how many aren't back using within the next 6 months. I'll tell you, it's the effectiveness is about 14%.
Mhm.
I live right next door to about 100 rehabs in the Malibu area of California. They cost around $2,000 a day with a minimum of 30 days spent in there, whether it's a teen or an adult or whatnot. And with that effectiveness right now, not using any technology, the 12-stepping or whatever, it's kind of like going to LAX and spending $60,000 on the plane ticket, knowing that 86% of the planes are going to crash.
Mhm. Wow.
So for immersive technology like you're doing, which has been shown effective in breaking addiction, that might be an interesting market for you.
Speaking of crashing, Chris, I think we lost.
I'm here.
No worries. Yeah, don't worry.
This computer. I'm so sorry.
No worries.
Did you hear most of what I said?
I heard of
14,000 rehab centers in the US, incredibly low rehab effectiveness right now, and a lot of money being spent on it, $45 billion. And like I said, in my neighborhood, it's $2,000 a day to go into rehab.
Yeah.
Mhm. Wow. Yeah. A big number.
Just for the back of your mind.
I think they're doing a lot of really cool stuff. I have a friend, colleague of mine that is doing work in addiction research, but he does a lot of stuff in VR chat. Not VR, it's like a VR chat, but they've developed this whole system for working with addicts within VR. A lot of it's exposure therapy, because you can go into like real chat rooms, and where they have like simulated bars and that you can practice being in situations where people really don't know that you are actually there with your therapist, working on, practicing being around, alcohol or whatever. So
yeah. Well, unfortunately, traditional therapy, whether it's Jungian or whatnot, doesn't work on 21st century, on millennials. They're not real amenable to, gee, lie on the couch and tell me for the next hour about your mom. Whereas for experiential stuff like you're doing, that does work. The VR, some friends of mine at the Virtual Reality Medical Center, in case you ever want to meet them, down south in the Scripps Center, are using VR for PTSD.
Yeah.
And it's very, very effective as opposed to traditional. So it's got great potential, and there's a lot of money being spent. And if we can connect money with potential, there might be some interesting things there.
I also think that we're in a time and space too where medical schools especially too are waking up to this idea of what do we do when we can't go into our simulation centers, or how can we train our medical students when we can't have a lot of people in the in rooms working. I know at Yale they've had to get really creative with how they've had to train medical students, but it would have been this amazing opportunity in time when VR could have done a lot of training opportunity.
Yeah.
Medical training. We have a really expensive medical simulation lab, where people go in and work on dummies and simulate emergency situations. Nobody obviously can do that during a pandemic. So now that they're having to really think about, oh wow, maybe this crazy idea, of AR, VR is not so thinking of training medical students. So I think when we're coming out of this, I think people may be much more open to ideas of game-based learning and XR and just out of opportunity. I think.
Yeah, GBL and telemedicine as well.
Yes.
I saw the numbers. They're amazing. Telemedicine was like 0.2% or something for mental health. They're even now calling it telemental medicine. Yeah, 0.2% before COVID, and right now it's over 25%. And the rules are changed, the laws are changing. The funding is now also available from the government, and so they think that will never go back, even after COVID leaves us in 2 years or whatever it is. And you're right there on the pointy end of the spear of being able to do that, knowing the technique.
Yeah. Right now too is funny because nobody's really, there's no point in talking about being in schools when schools aren't in session. It's interesting because we will loop back around. XR will become a kind of, it will move forward again as soon as we're kind of out of this COVID mess. It will just happen. And so I think it's important for us, those of us in this group, to kind of keep that momentum going, because it will be there again once we kind of get out of this place where we can start sharing headsets, and we could get back to normalcy. We're going to see it in different.
What headset do you think you're going to go to if Go is sort of dying?
Well, I think I have been talking about kind of I've written them letters. A lot of universities have been writing them letters about how it's impacted their research. So I think that they are going to have to make some sort of change. And we've been working with them to try to make some sort of temporary change in terms of my research in my lab. That's not a permanent solution. In terms of, they might give us some enterprise accounts or whatever, to keep us moving forward. But they are planning to do something to kind of fix that problem. I don't know what it is yet, but we've been in talks with Facebook to try to remedy that. But I would still like to put it on the Quest, just because I love the Quest. I think it's a great headset. I think it's perfect for what we've done. It would be easy to do. Just as long as Facebook kind of follows and on there and finds a solution for the logins. Other than that, we would probably go with something like a Pico, just be in the kind of, because then you would have to sell the headset with. And I'm not a proponent of that, but that might be for our research. We might be able to do that.
The nice thing about the Go is it's simple. You can train somebody in it in 20 minutes, whereas all the other stuff, and you don't have to move around the room. You just have one controller and it,
Yeah. Great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Anyway, just again, thank you so much for the work you do.
Thanks. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And we talked about the remote, more like a remote collaborating. I find out there's a really interesting side. If I can share my screen, And then, yeah, this is a really interesting, gamification online meeting. You can see my face. I put the link and password. So yeah, and you can also share, your screen. So, and you can add member and you can add like different things. For example, this one is, like beach scene, and you can add castle scene. And a lot of people, I think, I think this is a really good way for, remote working, but they can do like happy hours, in this format. Yeah, this is just some thoughts. And by the way, we are just launching X Reality Academy. Yeah, and we will launch our first class, gamification, at the end of this month. So stay tuned. Yeah, so this is just stuff that from me. Yeah, okay. So any other questions? Yeah, anyone has any question? I think JT replied to Juliana about private companies. Yeah, on the chat.
Right. So Chris mentioned rehab centers. What people need to understand is rehab centers are businesses. They're always looking for new customers. They call their customers patients. But at the end of the day, if a rehab center were to partner or offer some partner with Kim, your team, your lab, and be able to offer to the marketplace not only all of the standard services that they're currently offering, but also something in VR that could be a differentiator for them, where they might attract additional patients, customers, vis-a-vis a rehab center that does not offer that. So I'm just thinking, how do you generate revenue? Because if you're looking for private money, then you have to show that there's some sort of financial return for the investor, and maybe it's the rehab centers, maybe that's the entry point.
Yeah, I just a quickie. Yeah, Malibu area at $2,000 a day, and there's a ton of money being made. The biggest problem for her is the competition. How does she get the message across on her website that she has some kind of competitive advantage? Because right now, all the rehabs around here are showing, oh, here's our center. There's an ocean view. We serve this terrific food, and people are happy. And by the way, we have an ocean view. That's it. They all look the same. She said she'd be happy to pay money for something that gives her a competitive advantage, where she can show, hey, we have this that other people don't. And by the way, because of that, we have a much higher rate of effectiveness than the competitors do. There's 14,000 rehabs in the US. So it's a very competitive field. And like JT just said, they're hiring agents, they're hiring salesmen to go grab customers and bring them in on commission.
Wow. Okay, cool. So any other questions? Cool. Okay, so thank you, Kimberly. And then I will get in touch with you pretty soon. And then thank you, everyone. Yeah. So yeah, I was thinking about changing the monthly kind of pitch event into that like hangout, this one. Let me share with you. This one. Yeah, so we can all, and it's really interesting if you want to try it. It's like if you log in, if I get closer to you, you can hear me and you can see me. But if you are far away from me, and we will disconnect. So this is kind of mimic the real world. And I believe they just got like this company Gather.town is just got funding, a few million fundings. So I believe they will add a lot of like small games. Yeah, so I think this is kind of helping like, remote team or some meetups. If we want to do like, hang out, hang out, we can still do it, So I think, yeah, in the future, if there's any, like every monthly we have a gathering event, I will try to host in this place so we can kind of feel like we are, really hang out together, but actually not. Yeah, so let's just some little stuff that I find out. Okay, thank you so much, and I will see you guys pretty soon. Okay,
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.